Hey everybody, how's it going? Dan Sugar here on Yesshift with my son Steven. And this is part of our, what do we call it? It's a solo series, Steve, but it's like
it's like
solo albums after they've joined Yes. Yeah, that's it.
yeah, like weirdly we've done one of these like unintentionally. Like before we did this series, we did it with Tony Kaye's End of Innocence. So I guess we consider that part 0 or something.
Yeah, because that we did that as because it debuted, whereas most of the stuff we're covering is old stuff.
Yeah, like what's interesting is both Tony Kaye's first solo album and Rick's first solo album since joining Yes are both historical. Like one was much nearer and like we lived through it, and the other is like centuries past. So it's kind of weird how that happened. And we're talking about the original keyboardist, now his successor. It's weird how that ended up happening. But,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And today's feature is Rick Wakeman's Six Wives of Henry VIII. A phenomenal album in so many ways. And when we say solo album, for those of you who might be young or music fans not really know how that all works, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're the only ones on the album, but it's a solo project as an artist as opposed to being in the band. And the reason why Steve and I suggested or decided, I think he suggested covering...
Well, it was your idea. You like came up with it. And...
Oh, no wonder it made so much sense to me then. I was about to explain it.
Yeah,
because my thought was, let's cover their solo albums from the period after they've joined Yes, even if they were still in Yes when they did it, because I wanted to kind of throw in the element on each episode of how much did being in Yes influence their solo stuff. It's easy to see the opposite if they had a solo career before joining Yes and how much that influenced Yes, but I thought the reverse element was different. And by the way, tell us where you're watching from and chime in on everything we're talking about. I have the monitor up here on another device so that we can see your comments. I'm in Globe, Arizona, which is about 100 miles east of Phoenix. Steve is in Baker's Neck, Tuckyville Field, California.
Yeah, it's in nowhere, basically, yeah.
But yeah, tell us where you're all watching from and chime in on this album and chime in on the questions Steve and I ask each other, because we don't really discuss this stuff before. He comes up with some notes just as a path, but we don't discuss, okay, so I'm going to say this, and then you say this.
It's not scripted.
Yeah. And sometimes we know each other's thoughts on a topic from talking about it for years, and sometimes we really don't. So you're part of the conversation as well. So please chime in, as my dog Sasha is. So Steve, where do you want to start?
So this was Rick's first solo album since joining Yes, and his first official solo album as well. I think I've told you this before, but it's a funny story for people who don't know. So, or maybe he doesn't think it's funny, but whatever. So, before this, there was an album called Piano Vibrations, and basically Rick went in, did some session work for a musician, like a singer who didn't show up that day, apparently. And then like he wasn't sure like what was gonna happen with it, and it ended up being released under Rick's name, and his management was like really upset about this, and he's like, he pretty much disowned Piano Vibrations. I've listened to a bit of it. Some of it sounds kind of generic and safe backing stuff, but there is like a little bit of adventurousness in the third track. I didn't listen to that much of the album.
Little pieces of his brilliance showing through.
Right. Well,
colored outside the lines a little bit of what the project was intended to be, maybe.
Maybe like the bits that I heard there wasn't as much of that virtuosity as what we expect from an actual Rick Wakeman solo album. And what's funny is you and I have talked about his 3 solo albums that came after this on an episode paying tribute to Mr. Newell, one of the musicians who's performed with him. So it's like we're finally getting to this one, like the first of those monumental, like iconic Rick Wakeman solo albums. And there was a recent article, like there are all these articles coming out, interviews with Rick, because he's been touring, he's finishing a tour, he's doing another one. This one is from Cleve Scene. It's from Cleveland, and it's a fun interview. I'll link it later on, but yeah, like this is a little bit of a tangent, but one of the things he mentioned is that he loved to host something with Ricky Gervais, and in my head, I'm like, that makes so much sense. How did I not think of that? Like they have similar type of humor.
Yeah.
But he was asked about his first solo album, Six Wives of Henry VIII. So do you want to start reading this, or should I start? Or?
Yeah, go ahead and start. And I'm going to show some photos from the album. Actually, right now, folks, you're seeing the inside cover, which as a gearhead, I think is cool because it shows his assortment of keyboards that he performed with back then and that he probably used for the most part to record this. But yeah, go ahead and I'll show this in the front cover as well.
Yeah, that's a nice photo there.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, so he says, in November of 1971, I was in Los Angeles on my first tour with Yes. My manager said, Jerry Moss at A&M Records wants to see you. So we went to the lot, which was Charlie Chaplin's old studios, and they had become A&M Records offices.
How cool is that? And I'll kind of read it from there. Years later, I was a neighbor to Charlie in Switzerland. How bizarre is that? And we talked about that a lot. Jerry said, you're signed to us with the Straubs. We signed you with the option that we could pick you up and make a solo record. He asked me to make a solo record. I thought it was fantastic. On that tour, I bought a book at the Richmond, Virginia airport called The Private Life of Henry VIII. This was 1971 and way before Walkmans or anything like that. So his point is he wasn't able to listen to like a book on tape or something.
Yeah, unfortunately, Rick Wakeman, not Rick Walkman. So he continues, so when you were on tour, you either read or sobered up from the night before, or you did both. I was reading this book about the wives, and I thought how wonderfully musical it all sounded. I bought more and more books on the subject. Through 1972, I recorded the album between doing tours and doing other things. So yeah, this was recorded throughout 72. So post-Fragile, maybe a bit of overlap with Close to the Edge, possibly. Yeah. And it came out January 1973. So yeah, and we got the track list here. Just read it real quick. So we got Catherine of Aragon, Catherine Howard. It's Catherine of Aragon, Anne of Cleves, Catherine Howard, and side two is Jane Seymour, Anne Boleyn, and Catherine Parr. So where do you want to start with this? Like, do you want to talk about some of the musicians who are on this, or favorite tracks, or how do you want to approach this?
Yeah, let's talk about a few of the musicians because some of the people watching or listening might recognize a couple of them. I don't know. So I'll kind of do a run through, and then we'll talk about the tracks. We can even go track by track and stuff. So
just real quick. On the Drum Talk TV page, we got Wayne Sims who says, "Hi, it's Wayne here, and Lester is pronounced as Jester in the UK." So thanks again for that.
All right, thanks again for that. Is right because that was corrected the other night, right? Am I right? Cool. Thanks, Wayne. Catherine of Aragon, the opening track features Bill Bruford, Steve Howe, and Chris Squire. It's essentially a Yes song without vocals, but not really because.
Yeah, Rick there's a bit of vocalizing.
Yeah, and Rick is the only one that wrote it, but it's neat that all of them are on that. It's basically the Fragile lineup without John, which is cool. Then Barry D'Souza plays drums on Catherine Howard, and Alan White plays drums on everything else. And then there's a few other great musicians. The great Ray Cooper. I've got to get Ray on Drum Talk TV. I'm a huge fan of Ray Cooper going all the way back to... I saw him live for the first time at the Arms Festival, which was the tour that the big stars did. Jeff Beck, Jimmy Page, Eric Clapton, Simon Phillips, Paul Rogers, many others for multiple sclerosis for the artist. It escapes my name right now. Help me out, folks, if you can remember. But Ray Cooper was on that. He played with Elton John for years and years. We'll talk about Ray again later when we talk about the live version of this album. So Ray Cooper's on there, David Cousins on electric banjo, and Catherine Howard, Chaz Cronk on bass guitar on Catherine Howard, and like I said, Barry
Yeah,
D'Souza
a
on
couple, a couple Straub's members there.
yeah. So it's neat. You know, he reached back into the family pool, basically, as I like to
Yeah.
put it. But yeah, you want to go track by track?
Yeah, well, we could go for that. So, Catherine of Aragon is
let's. Sorry.
Yeah.
I want to ask the audience a question, and then realize, I don't know the answer. Your answer to this question, and you probably don't know mine. So, folks, when did you first hear this? If you've heard it, if you have not heard it, and you're a prog rock fan, a Yes fan, or a Rick Wakeman fan, put your head down for a 5-minute timeout after this show, and then go get it. It's a phenomenal album, a very pinnacle album. When's the first time you heard it, Steve?
My first time was back in late 2008 when I was going through other prog rock bands' catalogs and also looking into the Yes members' solo catalog. I was re-listening to the Yes albums like in order, but also listening to the solo stuff in between. So
you're like 14?
Yeah, I was maybe 13 going on 14, yeah.
Cool. And what was your first impression?
Some of it was familiar because we've had the excerpts that he's performed with Yes and with ABWH, but listening to all of these in full, it was like, okay, so these are their full forms. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Catherine of Aragon and Jane Seymour and I believe Catherine Howard, those were all parts of the excerpts that he played on Yes songs. I guess I'm kind of going all over the place, but
that's okay. And that was my first exposure to this, was singing Yes songs when I was about 14. Well, that's weird. Same age as
oh wow,
yeah. And then I heard the album maybe a year later, but my first exposure was at 14, 12, 14, yeah. Something like that, watching Yes songs and seeing that. And then when a friend said, yeah, those are excerpts, Irene, I saw that on the liner notes, but a friend of mine explained, I said, there's a whole album of this shit. I got to get that. Instant complete fan. Not that I wasn't already, but it really gave you a peek into Rick Wakeman as opposed to Rick Wakeman in a band,
Yeah, and Catherine Parr, that was one that I've heard like in the Union Tour recordings where he does like the little duet with Trevor Rabin, so that's pretty cool. Anne Boleyn, also excellent. Anne of Cleves, I remember back then when I first listened, I was like, part of this reminds me of The Ancient, like it has the same or it sounds kind of similar.
Yeah, I never thought of that. Huh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I think one of our listeners has told us this before, but Catherine of Aragon was considered for the Fragile album before they got but because of rights issues, Rick couldn't put it on, so he put Cans and Brahms. Like it was gonna be titled Handle with Care, which would have been really funny with the Fragile title.
That's hilarious. And Eli Golden says, hello, Dan. Hi, how are you? Tell us where you're watching from. And yeah, go on, Steve.
Yeah, and
after you do the run through, I want to know what your favorite track is, if you can narrow it down to one, and tell us also, folks who are watching and listening.
I could just go into that right now.
We'll go through the rest of the track list since you started that.
Okay, so Catherine of Aragon, Anne of Cleves, Catherine Howard, Jane Seymour, Anne Boleyn, and Catherine Parr. So that's a track list, and
one of her favorites match.
Right. So should I go ahead and say my favorite then, or?
Yeah.
So my favorite is Anne of Cleves. It sounds really the most avant-garde to my ears, and the drumming is just so very quick and on point. I think it's Alan on that one. He's very on point, and
it is Alan. Yeah.
Yeah, it's got. It's very proggy, also has bits of jazz, I think. It's just a great mix, and it's a great pace.
That's my favorite also.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Maybe for the same obvious reasons. And yeah, it's a great album. Oh gosh, there's all these other I didn't see that you added all these other. I'm looking at just page. So let me mention just a few other musicians, folks. So we mentioned Alan White, Bill Bruford. We mentioned Steve Howe, Chris Squire. We mentioned Barry D'Souza, Chaz Cronk. Mentioned, of course, Ray Cooper. And then there's also Frank Riccati, plays percussion on Anne of Cleves, Catherine Howard, and Catherine Parr. Sylvia McNeil does the vocals on Anne Boleyn. Judy Powell, vocals on Catherine of Aragon. Laura Lee, vocals on Anne Boleyn. Dave Lambert, guitar on Catherine Howard. Les Hurdle, bass guitar. Les is a great bass player. Bass guitar on Catherine of Aragon and Anne Boleyn. Mike Egan, guitar on Catherine of Aragon, Anne of Cleves, Anne Boleyn, and Catherine Parr. Dave Wintour on bass on Anne of Cleves and Catherine Parr, also a great bass player. And Lisa Strike on vocals on Catherine of Aragon and Anne Boleyn. And Barry St. John on vocals of Catherine of Aragon. And when these were done live many years later, which we'll get to, there was a full choir, full orchestra, full band. We'll get to that when you're ready, Steve. We don't have to jump there right now.
Okay. Yeah, like these are very, like there are moments on a couple of these tracks where it sounds very spacey. Like Rick will do the whole and it's just very, it's signature Rick Wakeman. It's his style of like he really cements himself on this first solo record of his.
Yeah. After joining Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So let's go to the live versions. You mentioned the excerpts on Yes songs. You mentioned Sing, ARW. And my favorite is, and folks, you've got to see this, the whole thing all the way through in order. It's Six Wives of Henry VIII at Hampton Court with the full orchestra, full choir, full band. Adam Wakeman is also on keyboards. Tony Fernandez, Rick Wakeman's longtime live drummer. Ray Cooper is on percussion. The two guitar players and the bass player, I should know. I'm having a brain fart right now. Senior moments are great. Help me. Do you know who they are, Steve? Or you can look it up real quick while I just tell people a little bit more about it. And the narrator escapes me too.
Yeah, Brian Blessed. He has such a great voice. Like,
yeah, and he's such a great storyteller and has such a physical presence. He's perfect for coming out in between each song and giving the story of each wife and them meeting their end. And then the song starts. It's such a great production with Hampton Court in the background. In fact, here's while you look that up, Steve. Here's the DVD, folks. And I'll enlarge that. This is the front of the DVD, and it literally is at Hampton Court. Here's a live shot.
Yeah, so the bassist at that show was Jonathan Noyce.
Yes. Yeah, and he is just so solid.
Yeah, and I really liked how for that performance, the songs are played in like the chronological order of the wives. And
exactly.
Yeah, he also threw in a couple other tracks as well to fill out the set list. So it's a really well shot show. Have it on Blu-ray, and it's just so well done. It's just
it is very well shot. It's a great production all around. I have to say, I like the live versions a lot better than the studio versions. Nothing against the studio versions, but folks, if you follow the show, if you watch Drum Talk TV and hear me talk about music, I always gravitate towards live versions first when I discover something, in most cases. And then typically this is the case. I end up hearing live versions and like it better. I forgot to mention Live at Hampton Court came out not that long ago. 6, 7 years.
It was filmed in 2009. And
longer ago than I thought.
Yeah.
But still, it's light years ahead of when the album came out. And I think the versions are so much better, including our favorite, Anne of Cleves. It's just so much more articulated. That drop beat, that time signature. It's just, everyone is so tight. And you got so much going on. You got an orchestra playing with let me think, there's Rick plus, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, there's 7 members in the band. because there's Adam, the two guitar players, the bass,
Yeah, there are
Tony.
7.
Yeah, there's 7 of them plus a full choir plus a full orchestra, and it is tight as a 3-piece locking in. It's amazing. It really is. And the sounds, the modern sounds of his keyboards, yet the samples of the old keyboards. You know, like again, I reflect back to being 14, I think when I first heard the album, and like, what are these sounds? Was it? What is all that? You know?
It's like lasers.
Yeah, I mean, that's the typical mini Moog sound. So, a great, amazing job of reproducing such deep music in a way that is so digestible and totally works. It's not like, okay, we're doing it live, it has to just be the skin and bones. It's the whole thing and more, really. And I love that. I love that.
Yeah, and it kind of set a trend for a little bit, like Rick making these albums based on historical stuff or inspired by literature.
Yeah, exactly.
Like we have the couple albums that come after this, and later in the 80s he does 1984. So yeah, he's like taking inspiration from these outside sources and sort of making them his own.
Exactly. I want to read a comment, if I may, on the Yesshift page. Robert Heckman, thanks for joining us again. Robert says, a bit of trivia. On board Cruise to the Edge, we have a Rick Wakeman cape contest. Wow. With the winner decided during a cape fashion show, with the winner receiving a free cabin on the next year's cruise. There have been some Wakeman-worthy capes each year. I didn't know that. That is awesome.
Yeah.
They should announce the winner pulling into Cape Horn or something. That's really cool. I had no idea. By the way, folks, speaking of Wakemans, we're going to have Oliver Wakeman on March 26th. And we'll, of course, dive deep into Oliver's career, but we'll ask him about his dad and what his favorite Yes music is, and dad music, and, of course, other music. So just didn't want to forget to plug that since we're talking about Wakemans.
Yeah, it's got to be on Facebook Live at noon that day. So, yeah, feel free to send in any questions, and we might consider them.
Absolutely. What do you think of Hampton Court as a whole? And then do you have a favorite song from that?
Yeah, I probably echo the same things. Like Anne of Cleves is my favorite track from the album. So it's probably my favorite off of there as well. And, you know, just seeing the architecture, and it really feels like a crossover between the past and the present. It's like you're going back in time, and you also have the modern technology.
He's got the enormous church organ at the top of that really tall stairway. Got the finale with him and Adam on the guitars out in the front of the stage. That is just awesome.
Yeah, just all around great production, great like showmanship with that. Like with the shows, like he really goes all out, whether it be a really big lavish one or a smaller intimate one, like his piano concerts and whatnot.
Yeah.
And yeah, like the capes just became like his thing. Like it's part, and I love how he like the one that he wears at the Hampton Court concert. It's really cool.
Yeah, I saw him at the Beverly Theater in Beverly Hills in I want to say 82 or 83, somewhere around there. I don't remember the album he was touring, but he does the show, and then for the encore, he comes out. He didn't have a cape the whole time, but for the encore, he came out with one of his capes, and everyone went nuts. I mean, everyone went berserko, and he said, nothing like a little bit of nostalgia. And that was just so cool to see. And I'm looking at this thing thinking they must carry this in like a special Anvil wardrobe case. I'm sure they did, to take such care of it, because it was to see it in person, you really grasp how lavish it is. It had the white fur around the top and the sequins, and just the inner lining was quilted and shiny. It was just amazing. It was really cool. That was fun to see.
Yeah, I saw him back in November 2017 over in Camberley, England. This is when he was
Oh
doing
yeah.
the whole piano portraits thing. And yeah, I even got to meet him, which I wasn't expecting. He was doing the like signing after the show. And here's a little bit of trivia. So one of the questions I asked him about was John Anderson's biography on his website used to show like this timeline, and one of the things on there was like 1983, John, Rick, and Keith Emerson try to like do a collaboration, and but so I asked Rick about that, and he said that in the late 80s and in the 90s, Rick and Keith were trying to do something, but John was never part of that. So
Oh.
I don't know if maybe one of them misremembered, or if maybe John thought, oh, it'd be cool if I get with the three of them, I should tell them, and just maybe never told them or whatever. But in any case, like I would have loved to have heard Rick and Keith on something. Like yesterday
Yeah.
was the 6th anniversary of Keith's passing. Like he's another virtuoso, one of those prog rock keyboardists that really shaped the genre. Like there's a lot of that going on in the early 70s.
Since you brought that up, can I plug something real quick?
Sure.
Okay, so folks, if you go to the Drum Talk TV Facebook page, you'll see a photo of Keith and I from a few years ago. And being that yesterday was his passing, and Carl Palmer's birthday is on the 20th, and I won't be around for the 20th, I don't think. We already set on our schedule that on Drum Talk TV, I'm doing a tribute to both Carl Palmer and Keith Emerson, and I'm going to play some ELP music as well as some Asia music for Carl, part of Carl's history. So please tune in. It is some of my favorite music. And Rick and Keith are not drummers, but they are two of my absolute favorite musicians. And I got to spend a little bit of time with both of them. So join us for that to celebrate their music and their lives, both Greg Lake, Keith Emerson with Carl Palmer's music, and then Carl with Asia, which of course includes Jeff and Steve Howe. So check that out. That'll be what time is that again, Steve? It's
That's gonna be on. Yeah, it's gonna be on the 18th.
At 2:30 Pacific or 1:30 Pacific, if I remember right. 2:30 Pacific, because we're on the same time zone by then.
Yeah.
Okay, 2:30 Pacific, the 18th on the Jump Talk TV Facebook page. It'll be live. I'll take requests. Who takes ELP requests? Who's crazy enough? I am. I do. I'll take those requests and I'll play them. I already have a couple up my sleeve. I'll tell you what they are. I'm going to play live Tarkus. I'm going to play live Carnival 9 first and third impression, possibly the second if I can find a good recording of it. There you go. Okay, back to Rick. That's an interesting trivia. I didn't remember you telling me about that. I'm sure you did.
Yeah, we also have a comment in one of the groups I shared too. So Mike Shirk says, fond memories introducing this album to my kids. House was dark and a lightning storm was lighting the sky. Outstanding experience. Yeah, that's like a really unique memory. Like, you know, you got the lightning outside, you're listening to Six Lives of Henry VIII. Like that's like, I live for memories like that. Like when you remember something so specific of like, what was the smell when I was listening to this, or like, weirdly, like whenever I listen to 90125, I think about how I would read Goosebumps books while listening to that CD.
Oh, that's right.
2004.
I'm going to bring this photo up again because Brad Delph, one of our fans. Hey, Brad, thanks again for chiming in again. He says, I was always impressed by Six Wives of Henry VIII. When you open the gatefold, there was Rick surrounded by his keyboards. And it's a little difficult to read in this image, but yeah, they're all labeled, which I love. You know, I think most drummers are gearheads, and I'm a total gearhead when it comes to drums, keyboards, stringed instruments, amplifiers, anything. I'm into it. So this is really cool to show the legend, and especially back in the day with all this old caveman gear, some of which is still used, which is really cool. So yeah, that's a great note that the whole packaging of it was really cool. And the way it should be done, you know, tell a story with the packaging, not just nice artwork, which is part of it, of course, but showing all the keyboards and labeling what he played. It's one of the things I always admired about Rush's programs. They list everything that they used on the tour. Every guitar, every amp, everything, drums, heads, cymbal sticks. Same with Geddy's equipment. So that's cool. It started way back then with these prog heads. Cool.
Yeah, definitely. I see that. I think there's like another comment on Yesshift right there. So it's from Robert Heckman again, who says, I've always thought that a Rick Wakeman, Edgar Winter collaboration would be very entertaining.
Wow. That is interesting. Yeah, because Rick can certainly rock out. There's a couple things on Gaslamp. Was it called Gaslamp? There's one where he's jamming with Ian Pace. There's one with him and John Lord rocking out, trading solos. Oh my God, that is just John Lord, another having passed amazing musician royalty, keyboard royalty. It's cool to see these magnificent players collaborate, not just with the other magnificent players in their own bands, but with each other, especially on same instruments and things like that. That's really cool. That would be interesting, though, Edgar Winter. I could totally see that happening.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm looking through. So one of the questions, maybe we already answered this, but what effect did Rick working with Yes and having already done Fragile with them, what effect did that have on this solo album?
I think so. When did Six Wives come out? I forgot. 73, January 73, right?
Yeah.
So he had just started working with Alan White because Alan joined 2 weeks before the Close to the Edge tour. Bill Bruford never played on the tour for that album. So he must have really been impressed for Alan to play on most of those songs, and they didn't play together that long. So I love that. That says a lot about the answer to the question. And the fact that he had Steve Howe and Chris Squire and Bill Bruford play on the opening track, it clearly had a huge effect. I'm searching in the caverns of my brain to kind of compare Six Wives to an earlier solo album that Rick would have done. And I think it's clear that this is a much larger, grandiose picture. And to your point, Steve, it sort of set him on that path where he read that book about history, and that was the running theme for really what's a concept album. Then you have Journey to the Center of the Earth, and you have Return to the Center of the Earth, and where he wrote an unwritten story, which is really cool. King
Arthur.
King Arthur. There was, King Arthur. Oh, the live video of that is great too. This guy's just amazing. And I'm glad that I missed him. Unfortunately, I couldn't get to his show in Phoenix. I was heartbroken. First, it got canceled or postponed, and then when it got rescheduled, I just couldn't get there. I would have loved to have seen it.
Right, but yeah, I mean, there was like a bunch of stuff going on, so things happen. So do you have anything else to say about Six Wives of Henry VIII before we go into some, I guess, current news of upcoming things for Rick?
I don't think so. I think we covered it all. I'm going to look and see if any fans have any other comments. Folks, if you do, that you missed us covering or that we didn't cover that you want to add to the conversation, please let us know. All in all, I think it's a 10 out of 10. There isn't anything on that album from my musical sensibilities that makes me go, I'm going to skip over this one. Let me lift the needle over that one, go to the next groove. It doesn't happen on this. And especially, I can't emphasize enough how much I want to inspire people to get live at Hampton Court. It's truly amazing. It really is.
Yeah, it's hard for me to rate albums numerically.
I already said it's 10 out of 10.
More so than it is for me to rate films.
Well, that's interesting. Why? What's the difference?
I don't know. I guess I get more attached to music than to films for some reason. I don't know, but
I get that.
But yeah, I can't really find anything wrong with this other than I guess a minor critique is that On the recent re-listen, I realized, it sounds shorter than I would think. Like it's 36 minutes. It's like a few minutes shorter than one might think. Like it goes by really quickly. But I mean, if that's the only minor quibble that one can have with it, that really says a lot.
Yeah, that you want more. And I agree, because I'm used to the live version. You know, I haven't heard this album all the way through till today for years. Right. I mean, once Hampton Court came over, I went over there. It's just so good. It really is. It's so good. And I know it sounds like I'm overhyping it, but folks, when you watch it, write us. And by the way, you can write us. You can write us at yesshiftpodcast@gmail.com. Give us your thoughts on episodes. This is episode 34, plus there's about a dozen news desk reports. So we have around 50 episodes altogether or so. Sorry about that. And we'll take suggestions for shows. There's been a few shows that have come out of fan suggestions. We still got a couple up our sleeve. Yeah. And then you can follow us. We're not done. I'm just throwing this out there right now. You can follow us right here on our Facebook page, where we're going live, and then Steve pulls it down and he takes the audio, rips it, and he puts it on our Anchor channel at anchor.fm/Yesshift, which distributes it to about 7 different popular channels. What are they, Steve? They're
there's a bunch. Just go to anchor.fm Yesshift and people will see them.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
And then you can just pick your favorite one that maybe you're already subscribed to or whatever.
Right, yeah. So yeah, I guess now with that, we could go into Rick Wakeman news. So on his YouTube channel, he's uploaded After the Ball, again from that live portraits tour back in 2018. And he also uploaded something called Live Portraits Outtakes, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's like a little montage thing.
I'll play some of Rick in the background while you take us through this. Some Jane Seymour from this recent tour. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, so on his website, on February 27th, he's announced that Adam Faulkner is the drummer for the spring English rock ensemble shows. I'm just opening that up real quick and sort of summarize it. So Tony Fernandez is no longer part of that tour.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so there's a quote that says, Tony has been a brilliant mainstay of the English rock ensemble since 1975, but as he now lives permanently in Portugal and with all the current travel restrictions as well, it's just not viable for him to come over for a few shows here and there. Yeah, so that's a bit of a bummer, but... so it says Adam Faulkner, who previously worked with Adam Wakeman in Headspace and also stood in for Tony Fernandez with the Straubs in 2012 to 2014, alongside regular work with Amy McDonald, Dido, and Patricia Cass. So yeah, there's a little bit, change of personnel there,
I guess. I didn't know that about Tony.
Yeah. Yeah, and just looking through these other items. Okay, so go ahead.
I'm sorry. I thought you were going to take longer to look. I was just going to throw out, folks, also check out Yes Fan Dawn on YouTube. Shout out to Yes Fan Dawn on YouTube. That's where we grabbed the video that you're hearing the music from of Rick playing Jane Seymour live from March 2022 in Atlanta. So thank you, Yes Fan Dawn. Check out his YouTube channel. It's some really good videos there.
Yeah, definitely. Let's see. On March 8th, we got... okay, so it says playing on the track's original artwork charity auction. So there's like this... there's this original piece of artwork of Rick Wakeman. It was made by Lindsay Becks, a.k.a. L.A. Becks, who will be... And it will be auctioned at a special charity event, the Chelsea Lodge Festival, on Sunday, March 20th, with proceeds going to something called Lifelights. Let's see, a charity to maintain specialist technologies for children and young people using hospice services throughout the British Isles. So yeah, people can look up the details of that on his website. And... more recently, just yesterday, there's this announcement that Rick is joining the Rock and Romance Cruise in 2023. So I'm not very familiar with many of these rock cruises. Like Cruise to the Edge is the only one I'm somewhat
Yeah,
familiar
for me,
with.
that and Monsters of Rock I'm familiar with. But what was the last one? Rock and Romance?
Yeah, I'm looking at the lineup that's on this, like on their
That's
site.
funny, being that he's been married as many times as Henry VIII, I think.
Almost.
Has he been married more times than I have?
He's been married 4 times, I think.
Oh, so he and I are tied.
Okay. Yeah, but it looks like this cruise also has like Don Felder, formerly of the Eagles.
Cool.
There's something called the Newbies, just funny sounding name to me.
They're kind of new.
So yeah, it's pretty cool that he's taking part in that.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, and I also listened to something called Play It Forward. I think it's a podcast or maybe it's part of a radio show or something. But in any case, on February 28th, they put out this clip of an interview with Rick Wakeman. And they talked a little bit about the Beatles Get Back documentary and how it's like really cool seeing like the making of. And Rick was asked whether there might be like a recording of him making something at some point. And he suggested that could be a thing when he records when he's recording his solo album this coming summer. But he says he wouldn't want to record the early stages of it because it might be too distracting to him. But yeah, I like making of stuff like that. You know, behind the scenes, you see the genesis of the music. Not to be confused with Genesis, the band, but you know.
I have been a documentary fan my whole life, and I've been a music documentary fan since I saw my first music documentary at, I think, 10 years old. It was a documentary called Chicago at the Ranch, and it was Chicago recording at Caribou Ranch in Colorado, and it was great. I loved that because you got insight to them just being people as opposed to what we see on stage and what we look at on the album. So yeah, love all that stuff. Always have. Yeah.
Yeah, looking at comments on Yesshift, Eli Golden says, my favorite drummer is Neil Peart. And Robert Heckman says, good show, gotta go, see you next time. Yeah, thanks for tuning in, Robert.
Yeah, thanks everyone so much. Anything else, Steve, on this?
No, I think we've pretty much covered it. I guess like just a little tangent to that one of our listeners, Carl Coppage, whom I've been like messaging back and forth with, kind of brought up an interesting point, which is that there isn't a lot of solo stuff going on right now. Like we know, of course, Oliver Wakeman is working on stuff. John Anderson has Thousand Hands Chapter 2, but like when is that coming out? And he's working on all these other things.
Right.
But for the most part, it's looking like collaborations, like DBA, Arc of Life, stuff like that.
Right.
So yeah, it's kind of an interesting time, but it's cool to look back at these solo albums that were the members' first since joining Yes.
Yeah. What's the next one we're going to cover?
Yeah, so the next one is Two Sides of Peter Banks, which was made by, and surprise, surprise, Peter Banks.
Both of him.
Yeah.
That'll be fun.
Yeah, very clever wordplay there with the two sides, yeah. That'll be interesting. I don't think you've listened to that one, right?
I think I've heard maybe one or two songs, so I'm looking forward to diving in before we do the show.
Yeah, I've listened to it once, maybe twice. I'm going to listen to it again to refresh myself on it, but I remember really liking it, so we'll get into that. That'll be on the 17th, St. Patrick's Day, because that's just when one of the free slots on our schedule ended up being.
Yeah. Wear green.
Yeah, it's going to be 7 p.m. Pacific, I think.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's
okay,
correct.
yeah. All right, yeah, so tune in for that.
And then it's the next day that I'm doing the Carl Palmer, Keith Emerson tribute on Drum Talk TV.
Yep. So, yeah, lots of great stuff coming up. And always appreciate hearing from listeners and prog rock fans alike. Wayne Sims says all-time favorite drummer is John Bonham. Yeah, it's another legend right there. Like, yeah,
My first biggest influence, absolutely. Yeah.
right.
Something special happening regarding that I can't mention yet.
Oh wow.
Here's well, you know about it, I think.
Maybe. Well,
It has to do with
we'll talk about later, I guess. Maybe if you mention it to me, you'll.
Has to do with the Drum Talk TV 10-year anniversary.
Oh yeah, I remember now.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, something real big that I can announce a year or two, a month or two from now. But a little fun fact about me. If anybody out there, Steven, someone I meet, if you tell me something that I've got to take into the afterlife and not tell anyone, I can absolutely do that. Keeping my secret is really difficult for me. When we work on special Drum Talk TV stuff, it's so hard for me to keep bottled up. 3 years ago, or I'll just say at one point, I don't want to give too much away, I had a surprise 60th birthday for my wife, and a bunch of her kids came up from Vegas. We live way up in the mountains in Arizona. She had no idea. That was one of the hardest secrets I ever had to keep. So it's hard for me to keep this other thing. But John Bonham, one of my biggest influences, him and another very, very famous drummer, musician, vocalist, I'll leave it at that, will be part of this big Drum Talk TV event, one form or another, that will be, I can say this, filmed in November, televised in January. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, it's a nice little teaser.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, lots of things going on with music. It's amazing how many things we can make out of all of it. It's
it's great to see bands out on the road too. That always gives more to talk about, and it gives a sense of normalization, kind of getting back to normal. I know that all the artists are really thrilled to be back on the road. It's making it a little more difficult to schedule interviews online, and it's hard for me to get down to Phoenix sometimes to do interviews in person like we used to in Vegas and like we've done in Phoenix. But we'll be working on that on the Drum Talk TV side, and Steve and I have a whole list of folks that we are or have approached to be on this show from Yes. So stay tuned for that. And like we said, next up is Oliver Wakeman.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Two sides of Peter Banks and then Oliver Wakeman.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as far as a guest.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
All right. Thanks everybody so much for following what we do. Share it with a fellow Yes/Wakeman/Prague fan and
/Cape fan.
Cape fan for sure. Keys fan. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks everybody.